Welcome to Reflection in Motion. Today we'll be talking about culture. Culture was meant to serve, not rule. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what culture is? We talk about it all the time: cultural values, cultural identity, cultural change. But rarely do we stop to ask, where did all this come from? Culture was created or formed by men and women in response to their environment. It was never meant to be eternal, it was meant to be useful. At its core, culture is simply the way of life of a people. The beliefs, habits, customs that shape how we live, think, and relate with one another. But here's something many of us forget. Culture was not handed down from heaven. It was created by men and women just like you and me, valuable human beings trying to make sense of their world. They looked around and saw their environment and built ways of living that helped them survive, stay connected, and find meaning. In other words, culture was humanity's response to its environment. But just like weather changes, our environment changes too. And when it does, the culture that once made perfect sense can start to feel outdated. The truth is, culture was never meant to be eternal, it was meant to be useful. It's supposed to serve us, not rule us. Yet, somehow, we've become so attached to methods, that's the how, that we forget the principles, that's the why. We defend old ways not because they still work, but because they feel familiar. And that's why we struggle so much with change. In today's talk, I want to unpack that idea, why we cling to methods, why culture feels so hard to change, and how remembering the why can help us build a healthier and more adaptive way of living. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get into it. Culture was meant to serve, not rule. So in my earlier given definition, I said culture was created by man. Let us mash out the different parts of that definition. Culture was created by man, and man is fallible. You see, culture didn't just appear from nowhere. It was created, crafted by human beings, people like us, people with biases, fears, creativity, and limited understanding. That means culture carries the fingerprints of human imperfection. It reflects both our brilliance and our blind spots. When we look at some of our long-held traditions, our social systems, it's easy to forget that they were someone's idea, not divine law. Someone once looked at the world and said, this seems to work, let's make it a rule. For example, once upon a time, society believed that leadership was only for men. That wasn't written by God. That was a cultural decision, built on the limitations of the era's worldview. The danger is when we take human ideas and turn them into eternal commandments. Because if man is fallible, then anything man creates, including culture, must be open to question and improvement. Culture should serve humanity. Humanity should never be enslaved by culture. The other side of the definition, I said culture is man's response to his environment. And our environment always changes. Every culture is born from its environment. That's the truth. Think about it. People from the cold region built houses from stones and fought to stay warm. People in hot regions built open homes and wore light clothes to stay cool. Culture at its roots is simply how we adapt to our surroundings, physical, social, and even spiritually. But just like weather, the environment keeps changing. Technology changes, economies change, our values and priorities evolve. Yet sometimes we hold on to cultural practices that were made for a world that no longer exists. Take education, for instance. The schooling model we still use today, designed during the industrial era to produce factory workers who could follow instructions and repeat processes. But now, we live in a world that rewards creativity, emotional intelligence, and adaptability. Still, we cling to memorizing standardized tests, methods that don't serve the new environment. Or think about gender roles. In other societies, they made sense, right? Survival depended on dividing labor efficiently. But now, the rigid roles often limit people more than they help. So when the environment changes and culture doesn't, tension begins. You see different talks about men this, men rules, women rules, this, that. All of these are just tensions coming from what? The inability of us to shift our culture as our environment shifts. That's why people feel torn with what is and what was. The other side of the definition, when I said culture was not meant to be eternal, it was meant to be useful. Think about it. Here's the out of it. Culture was never meant to be eternal, it was meant to be useful. It's a tool, not a temple. Culture is a tool, not a temple. And tools are meant to evolve as the world changes. When a tool no longer serves its purpose, we don't worship it, we replace it or redesign it. Yet, with culture, we often do the opposite. We protect it, defend it, label anyone who questions it as rebellious or disrespectful. But culture's purpose was never to be worshipped, it was to be worked with. The real wisdom lies in holding on to the principles behind our culture. The why. Why staying flexible with the methods? The how. I say again. The real wisdom lies in holding on to the principles behind our culture. That is the why. Why staying flexible with the methods? The how. Because how may expire, but why can always find new expression. So maybe the question we should be asking isn't, is our culture changing too much? But rather, is our culture still useful for who we are becoming? Because culture is supposed to grow with us, not restrain us. It's not a museum to be preserved, but it's a garden to be tended to, constantly pruned, replanted, and renewed. A culture that serves humanity. So when we talk about culture, we have to remember it is not sacred because it's old or started from time immemorial. No, it is sacred because it once served us. Culture was created by people, and people are fallible. It was a response to the environment, which has a long time ago, changed. It was never meant to be eternal, it was meant to only be useful. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing preservation with purpose. We began protecting the methods instead of preserving the meaning. And that's why we struggle with change. Because change threatens what feels familiar. But the truth is, culture was never supposed to become comfortable. It was supposed to be constructive. When we hold on to traditions, beliefs, or a practice, the question isn't how long we have done this. The real question is, does this still serve us? Many of us say, over my dead body, my forefathers did not do this, my forefathers did not do that. We cannot do intertribal marriages and all these things. These things were obtainable in the world behind us. Why are we not moving on? Because the beauty of culture isn't in its permanence, it's in its ability to evolve. A culture that cannot adapt will eventually break. Just like Hooke's law of elastic limit, right? It will eventually break. But the culture that listens, learns, and grows, that culture thrives. So maybe it's time to look inward. What are the methods in your life, in my life, in your family, in your community, in your faith, in your work, in your spirituality, that you've been holding on to, even though the world around you has shifted? And what will it look like to return to the principles, to the why, and rebuild from there? Because when we understand the why, we gain the courage to resign the how. When we understand the why, we gain the courage to redesign the how. Culture should never be a cage that traps us. It should be a compass that guides us. Maybe that's what growth really is. Not abandoning where we came from, but remaining and reimagining it so that it still speaks truth in the present. Culture was never meant to be carved in stones. It was meant to be written in sand. Firm enough to stand, yes, but flexible enough to change with the tide. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we keep both our history and our humanity. Thank you for listening to me in this session. We'll see you sometime again. Bye for now.